Alright class, so I'm going to talk to you guys about something that actually really irritates me. So generally the US is known for being like the first responder to any sort of crisis that occurs in another country. You know, we typically have that, you know, we're the go-getters, you know, we're going to solve that crisis, when in reality we have a bunch of issues ourselves that we kind of like overlook. I mean, for example, we have a rising debt crisis, we have a harsh struggle for jobs, a weakening environment, immigration and health, any sort of those issues that we have in our own country. That being said, I feel like we should end foreign policy and focus on domestic policy, focus on the issues that we have today, instead of focusing on problems that are occurring in other countries. You know, the saying like, why help those when we can't even help ourselves, so to speak. So today I'll be talking about what foreign policy is, when did it start, how much we spend on it, what is our current domestic policy, and what are some of the domestic issues that we face today, and what is a way that we can solve them. So for foreign policy, like when did it start? Well, it was around World War I when we officially started helping out other countries. For example, Belgium. It was a war-torn country at the moment in World War I, and so we sent food and aid to them. And it wasn't until World War II, or during that era, that we established the United Nations Rehabilitation Administration. And then in 1961, we officially created the Foreign Assistance Act, which was designed to refine and reform the issues that we would eventually solve. Now, that being said, how much money do we actually spend on foreign policy? Now, essentially, we divvy it up into two main categories. There's the military assistance and there's the economic assistance. So in the military assistance, it is specialized into stabilization and security. In the economic assistance, it is based on health, education, agriculture, and infrastructure. And so in 2012, we spent $48.4 billion just on foreign policy. Now, $17.2 billion went to the military assistance, and the $31.2 billion went to the economic assistance. And in 2013, last year, we spent $55 billion on foreign policy. Now, it went up, $7 billion budget. So $55 billion is being spent on that. Now, just imagine like what we could do with $55 billion in our own country. Just think about that for a second. And not to mention, I mean, the soldiers that we do send out there, they can be potentially killed. I mean, it happens all the time. Now, I've talked to you guys about what foreign policy is and how much it costs. Now, what is domestic policy? So, I looked up an official quote as to what domestic policy is, and I was taken to whitehouse.gov, and in the middle of the website, they had a quote from President Barack Obama stating, "We all share a responsibility to move this country closer to our founding vision, that no matter who you are or where you come from, in America, you can decide your own destiny." So essentially what they're saying is, you know, this is like the land of opportunity, so you can be whatever you really want to be. But with so many issues that we're facing today, I mean, it's kind of hard to do so. I mean, we have, for example, in California alone, what do we have? A drought. We have rising tuitions and fees. I mean, just last week or 2 weeks ago, we had Ferguson, Missouri riot that's spread all across the U.S. I mean, these are big issues. And then not only that, but we also have homelessness. We have immigration. We also have urban affairs, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we have a bunch of issues that are being overlooked, and it's quite a hassle. And those are just examples of them. I mean, I have some statistics for you. So in 2013, from the annual homeless persons report, 610,000 people were homeless on a given night. And we also have, pretty sure we all suffer from this as college students, income inequality, and that has to deal with the gap in between the rich and everyone else. So in 2013, there was a statistic posted on pewresearch.org stating that 65% of Americans feel that the gap in between the rich and everyone else in terms of wages, salary, income, whatever you would like to call it, has widened drastically in the last decade. Furthermore, college affordability. 77% of Americans feel that it is way too hard to pay for college in 2013. 44% of that group said it's not even practical to go to college because it's too expensive for them. So there's just some examples of domestic issues that we have right now. And in the State of the Union address, the 2014 State of the Union address, 78% of Americans in a poll stated that they do not care about foreign policy. They believe that President Obama should be focusing on our own domestic policy instead of our foreign policy. They do not care. And why is that? Well, like me, I believe, like I said before, why fix other people's problems when we can't even fix our own? It's that simple. Today I've talked to you about what foreign policy is, how much should we spend on it, what are some of our current domestic issues, and what way we could, this is like the one way we could solve this right now, is if we, for example, we take that $55 billion that we spent on last year, maybe it's even $60 billion right now, but we take that money and we divvy it up into like little subcategories. We had $10 billion for homelessness, we could have $15 billion for a wage increase, we could have another $10 billion for lowering the cost of tuition. There's many things we can do. So let's stop spending all this money on other countries, focus on ourselves, and end the domestic issues we have today in America. Thank you.
All right, Jalen, what did you think?
So Nathan, to me, he's a natural speaker. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Introduction. It was a right introduction. You made a clear point that point of view to focus on Indian foreign policy and focus on domestic policy. Your points were clear. There were a few times I heard your voice going in and out, like you speak really loud, and then a couple times I heard you. Transitions were clear, and you did list a lot of percentages and years that things occurred, so it was a little hard for me to follow. But other than that, I like it. And then you summed it up for me.
All right. Well, the opening sounds like you're passionate about your point of view on that. I like that idea. I do think that you're conflating foreign policy with foreign aid, and that there is a difference between those two, and that was sometimes a little bit confusing to me. U.S. policy in regard to other nations is not necessarily the same thing as giving money to those other nations. Sometimes it is, because that's the only policy that we have, and I think that there's a legitimate place to make a criticism there. What's strange to me is that there's not really any discussion of whether or not that those expenditures have any benefit to us. In essence, you're saying, well, we can't even take care of ourselves. What makes us think we can take care of everybody else? But you cited historical examples where the United States was very successful at saving millions of lives, at reducing tension around the world, preventing all kinds of problems. You mentioned, post-World War I. You mentioned, what happened after World War II. And I'm going, okay, well, that sounds like an argument for this kind of assistance as opposed to against this kind of assistance. What you needed to have was a little bit more argument that says, look, here's what we're spending now. We're spending $8 billion supporting militaries in these particular places, and that has not prevented war. It's not produced a government that's favorable to us. We've got instability there. It's not a good expenditure of our money. We spent $5 billion in these countries trying to feed people, but the overwhelming amount of poverty is preventing that from being effective. It's creating a negative attitude toward the U.S. among those countries. People resent being dependent on anything like that. Some argument that says that we're not getting any bang for our buck that we're spending overseas. I didn't hear any argument like that, and that seems to me like one of the big weaknesses in this presentation. The other thing that I see as being a little bit problematic is this notion that it's just money would make a difference. At the end, you say, well, we took $60 billion and we split it up amongst all those issues. I'm afraid I'm kind of a cynic at this point, and $60 billion, that's a lot of money to you and me. Congress spent that in the last hour. That's how fast our money is going. And the idea that $60 billion would make a difference to all of these things that you talk about, college tuition, homelessness, income gaps, all those kinds of things. I need a better argument on that. I need to see some demonstration that such a thing's possible. If you could show, for instance, that if we spent an extra $5 billion a year on student aid, that it would get 100,000 more students graduating from college every year, then I'd say, okay, there's something that matters, and the amount of money that you're talking about would work. As it is, though, it sounds very generic in nature. Like, it's like the idea, if I give a $5 bill to a homeless person, that's going to help them. It'll help them that day. But I'm not sure how long how long can you make a $5 bill last for somebody in those circumstances? Is it going to lift them out of poverty? Is it going to give them enough clothes to go out and be able to get a job? Will they be able to take care of whatever illnesses that they have that might cause them to be in a homeless situation? Those kinds of things. That's overly optimistic, and I think you needed to kind of build a stronger argument for that also. So the two positions that you're taking, I think, are a little bit weak. Now, the one thing that you do that I think you advance pretty well is that whatever we're doing, it doesn't reflect what the American public thinks is appropriate. And therefore, we're not being, the government's not being responsive to the desires of Americans in regard to these kinds of issues. And I think you could build a stronger argument around that. I think that would be pretty effective. I'm going to agree with Jalen, that you're a good speaker and you generally talk to us pretty effectively. You seem relaxed and confident when you're speaking. Sometimes your voice does drop out a little bit. That's not that big a deal, but like I said, the content just seems like it's underwhelming, and it needs to be a lot stronger. All right, thank you.